Hey friends, helps if I put my microphone up. Welcome back to the channel. Just give me 1 second here and I will just get my microphone a bit better sorted. So welcome back to the channel. I'm excited to be bringing you today for the first time a stream I've wanted to do for a while on the channel, where I'm going to be adding a professional touch, that is helping a subscriber transform a project of theirs, showing how to unlock new potential in their track by making key improvements. So as always, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll hang out, have fun, and discover new things along the way. The goal, as always, is to help you to become a better producer, to learn how to sound and produce like you. So stick around and join me for some hands-on insights and inspiration. I'll explain everything as we go. So without further ado, let's dive into today's stream. So hopefully, now that I actually connected my microphone, that's all sounding good and everything's working. Quick shout out, of course, to Xavi Diaz, also Theo Mel in the chat there. Hola Heath, hola Xavi. Hi everybody, and hi to those of you that haven't already commented in the chat. If you're joining the stream today, do just drop us a hello, let us know how you're doing and how things are going. So microphone wise, I think we're probably fine there. Let's have a quick test of some audio. So let's play a little bit of a scene that we have here in this project. So I think we're pretty good with all the levels. Everything's tested and working well. So a quick one, a shout out to the handle, a YouTube handle, Macarona After Party, pretty cool name. If you're watching this stream or you're joining the stream later, a big shout out and thanks for the nice comment. It's always nice when someone gives you feedback, but in a positive way, not just a straight criticism or a thumbs down on a video. What happened in last week's stream was my webcam essentially was blocking the LFO and glissando demonstration that I was doing down in the MIDI clip envelopes of the project that I was working on in last week's live stream. So as a consequence, I've kind of worked a bit this week on changing my webcam, the position of where it sits in the screen, and hopefully it will be a hit with you guys and girls, as in not getting in the way of things important. I tried that idea for a while, quite liked the idea of where I had the webcam previously, but in the end, there was a lot of needing to remember to keep the info tab open. Therefore, things like that wouldn't happen. So once again, big shout out to Macarona After Party. Thanks for, as I said, letting me know in a nice way that you enjoyed the content, loved the stream, but my webcam was blocking. I've reacted to that, made a change. Hopefully it's a thumbs up on that front. So working on a subscriber's track, it's a bit of a mouthful, looking to give them a bit of a professional help today and elevate their track, raise the bar, make some key improvements and unlock the potential that's already in there. So let's start by firstly a quick little story here where I tell you a little bit about Theo, whose techno project I'll be working on today. Theo's a passionate house and techno DJ and producer from Slovenia, who I met during my time teaching Ableton live at Point Blank Music School's Ibiza campus, where Theo was a student of mine. Theo is a dedicated producer who's willing to put the time into his craft to grow and learn. He likes to use analog synths and drum machines alongside Ableton Live. In recent years, I've had the pleasure of continuing to assist Theo with his music production journey through private coaching. So it's therefore a big pleasure to be working today on the music of a subscriber and also a friend, helping them to unlock this new potential in their track. Theo has given me full license to do whatever's needed, and I really appreciate him sharing his music with us all. So big ups to Theo, and let's now finally kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to be doing today. So as you heard in the little audio test, if you're already here, we have a techno project from Theo. He's got it pretty organized here, which is great. We're going to look at it in the session view here, and we can see that he's got some groups and he's got some tracks and scenes laid out as well, where he's already started to jam out a bit of an idea of some progression and energy levels. What we're going to do is jump straight to the sort of peak area of the track, let's say the main kind of max energy section, and have a look at what works, what we might change, and what we need to add, subtract, change, etc. So the scene you heard a moment ago, if you're here at the very beginning of the stream, is more or less the scene that contains those elements. So let's just give it a playthrough and absorb it for a second. So pretty cool. I mean, great that Theo has given me a pretty good platform to start with, to be honest. That sounds pretty good. Perhaps, you know, those of you who are producers out there might already have some ideas about what you think is missing or what might need to change, but we've got a nice kind of groove. We've got a tempo set. We've got a scale going on in here, which we'll look at in a little bit. There's a key and a scale. So let's maybe start with the low end of the track. That is what is currently the kick and the bass. And so if we solo up the kick drum over here, and we're going to grab the bass line as well over here. We've got options also, which is fantastic. Theo's given me the MIDI as well as in his studio workflow. As I said, there's quite a lot of hardware going on. So let's solo the bass in audio and the kick drum, and let's just have a listen to that. And I noticed Theo's got two different kick drums here, so maybe we'll start by having a little look at what the options are, the choices are with the two different kick drums. So on the track that's currently active in his project, he has a synthesized kick, which is made in Operator. Quite an interesting kind of kick here with 4 oscillators all layered up on top of each other and using an interesting tree here of a little bit of FM synthesis and a little bit of subtractive together. We've got a reverb, a drum bass, and a little bit of EQ8 on the ends here. Let's have a look at the other alternative kick drum. So we're just going to switch that on for a second. And that seems to be a possibility of probably the 909 bass drum in the 909 Ableton Live Core kits. And he's kind of followed it with the same kind of processing chain here. Perhaps there's a little bit of a difference in the EQ3s here, although I don't think they're doing a lot at this point in time. So let's see what happens if we try that bass line with the 909 kick instead. So let's have that in solo, the bass in solo over here. And okay, so let's switch off these EQs. So if we start with sort of this, as I said, and then we build our way a lot up from there, I can see that Theo's tried to execute something that's really popular in techno in both of these two tracks, and that is to have like some kind of a rumble or ambience on your kick drum, right? And so this reverb is essentially kind of providing that kind of atmosphere, let's say, to the kicks. And in this case, as I said, it seems to be fairly similar on both tracks. He's kind of applying the same idea. So I could kind of hear that very quickly straight away inside this project. Let's have a look at what can be good about that, what maybe doesn't work with it, and how we can maybe improve that if that's something we want to do. So let's just close up the drum bus and EQ8. Maybe we can even switch those off for a second, and we'll look at the preferred kick for a moment, then we can decide in a second which one we're going to roll with. I have to say that I probably quite like the 909 a bit better, I think, than the synth kick, but maybe we can use them both as well in the arrangement where one plays early in the track and then the other one comes in later. That could actually work quite well, and I think kind of Theo may have tried that in the scenes here. I can see the 909 isn't in the same place as the synthesized kick, so maybe he was thinking about that, but perhaps we can in the end use both kicks, but kind of, as I said, use them as more an arrangement tool, dropping into the perhaps fatter 909 from the synth kick. So let's take a look at what might be an issue with this technique with it being kind of applied the way it is. That is mainly we're focusing on this kind of concept of the techno rumble or the reverb on this particular kick. So if I start by putting an imager plugin behind here, if you don't have one of these, there isn't. This is a third-party tool which you can get at the cost of an email from the iZotope website. It's free to download. You can just give them an email and then you can grab this plugin, and it's very, very handy for telling us information about the stereo field of something we want to check. So let's have a look at the synthesized kick. And we can see that, you know, currently the way it is, we've got a lot of stereo information and too much stereo information, especially for a kick drum, and it's phasing. That is that when we start to see it on the side meter here, it's got a lot of movement in the sides, and it's dropping below this 0. So between -1 and 0 on this meter here, it's kind of telling us that we'd be in danger of kind of losing some of that information if we summed everything to mono. So what do we mean by that? Well, if we were to test that, if we were to go and get ourselves a utility from Ableton Live and kind of grab the mono from the audio effects, so audio effects in the browser, the mono utility, and we kind of put that, we can put it afterwards. So what we're doing is if we put it in front of the visualizer, you'll see now we make the track mono and we still hear the reverb effect, but now we've summed it to mono. But if we weren't to do that, as I said, you've got this big kind of wild stereo kick. And is that a bad idea? Well, it could cause quite a few issues. As I said, it's in the low end. If you were printing this track to vinyl, that wouldn't work. Absolutely, the needle would jump out of the record. So the vinyl days of producing taught us a lot about kind of very much controlling the low ends, because if you have too much stereo in the low end and you want to press this track to vinyl, it wouldn't work. You'd need to kind of make it a lot more mono. So what are some of the options if this is a technique that you want to use? What are some of the choices? Well, you could see that we could just drop a mono utility at the end here and sum it down to mono. But kind of in the reverb itself, we also have, so if we look at that, let's have the kick playing again. If we look here, we have a stereo knob built into this particular reverb. And if we bring that all the way around to the left, well, we're kind of doing something similar built straight into the reverb, which has made a lot of sense now. You can see that the meter's kind of pretty happy with that. And we haven't had to add this mono utility at the very end. And we do have a bit more ambience than just pure mono, because if I make it pure mono, it looks like that. So it's somewhere in between, right? We've still got a little bit of ambience, but we've kind of brought it right down into a mono area. And you can see if I start to say I want a bit more stereo, you'll start to see what happens on the meter then, right? Both visually and on the side as we come around, right? So this technique of putting reverbs or delays or looking for that kind of room ambience or some kind of rumble or something on your kicks, be careful. And this should help hopefully a lot of you producers out there if that's something you want to do. Maybe something else that's quite a good thing to do when you do this kind of thing is, as it's an insert effects here directly behind the synth in this case, what we could also do is group the reverb into a rack and open up the chains of that audio effect rack we've just built and just give ourselves 2 chains. We create a fresh chain down here, a dry chain, and we're now kind of adding a send and return kind of workflow here directly on the track itself. So instead of adding a return track over to the right here or exposing those return tracks, right, and saying, okay, there's our reverb return, let's send a sum of this kick drum over, right? If we reveal the send and returns. So if we look at them over here, I guess at this point, maybe Theo's got those kind of switched off as he's not using those, but we could, let's see, just bring this down a little bit here. I can see them somewhere along the way, but yeah, I think he's just got them hidden at this point as he's got a bit of a different workflow. Let's just see if we can show those. There we go, sends. So we'll just do that for a second so you can see that. So instead of sending this kick over to a reverb return over here, so a bit of A to A, we can actually do a parallel workflow, the same as that workflow, but we can do it directly as an insert. And it's quite a powerful way to work because, you know, you're directly on the track, but now we've got a little bit more control than we had a moment ago because we've got a dry chain, which is allowing the kick to pass through. So if we play the kick and we turn that chain off, that's the dry kick heading to the master track, right? And you can actually see that the synth kick as well is actually not mono. So there's a few things going on here. That's an interesting observation because we've just now seen that the synthesizer as well, probably, yes, we have spread over here on the operator. And so if we bring that down, we're also controlling more and more of that, right? So there's some things to be aware of there. So let's put that back as it was. Let's be aware of that. But right now, this kick is just passing through to the master track without any processing. But now we can add the reverb return in the track itself and bring the volume down here. And we could dial in just a bit. A lot more control, right? So you're really in control of it here. It's not just slapped on the track and it's not kind of wild. You're able to dial in how much you want of it here, and you have a lot more control, right? And at the moment, we're controlling the stereo width within the effect itself, right? Down here in the reverb. So I would be going any sort of ambience or rumble that I would put on a kick, I would kind of set it up this way. So I hope that helps you guys and girls out there a lot. If you're wanting to do that, this is the way, a good way to go about that. So let's say if we're staying with this particular track for the moment, this particular kick track, let's bring the drum bus in, and we can leave it either behind the rack or we can bring it in behind the wide ambience here. It's not going to make a lot of difference. If it's outside here, again, it's kind of like affecting more or less the same. It's going over the top of everything that goes through here, but I think we can say that originally, was it just part of the reverb? Probably not. So let's listen to it and decide where it belongs. Does it belong globally over everything, or does it just stay attached to the reverb chain? So if we look at this, again, there's a lot of energy coming from this. And if we were looking at sort of what's going on a little bit, that's the level in and out of the effect before the drum bus. We can kind of see here. This is the level, and if we add the drum bus, we're gonna go way over that level on the other side of it, right? So let's kind of tone this down a bit here and see if we can again get the drum bus making a bit of sense. So let's maybe, what we'll do, so you can kind of see this a bit, let's duplicate that. So we've got two copies, we'll leave one as it was over here, and then we'll grab this one and we'll just reset things a little bit. Let's bring the crunch right down, the drive right down, the dampening is at its default. The boom is heavy, so let's say no boom for a moment. Is the kick a D0? Possibly, so we need to check that. If that's the boom we're adding, what is the frequency of the kick? So if we put like a tuner here, just in front, do we get that kind of, it's more of an F sharp at this point in time. So again, we could also tune the kick a little bit to a D. That could be a good idea here. So we're also learning lots, right? We're kind of working our way along here and we're learning a lot. There's a chat and there's a comment here I'm just going to read. Could we split the kick channel in two and make it mono under 100 hertz and over 150 hertz stereo? You could. I'm not sure I mean, by all means, go ahead and do that. I'm not sure that that's the best thing for kick drums, though. That sounds like something, this is answering Chavi Diaz's question in the chat. That would be something I would more think about if I was layering up different basses and treating different bands in different ways. I think you would cause, I don't really see personally for me, that there's any need to do that on a kick drum. What would you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve if that's something you're doing? What is the kick that you want from that? You're basically saying to me you want a kick that's mono under 100 hertz and stereo over 150. I'm not sure that's necessary for the kind of music that this is intended to be or what I make. I just want a good, solid, powerful kick in my track, right? So if you wish to try that, you can. And if you wish to separate the bands and separate the effects on the bands, you could do that. But I think it's making a lot of effort for what really just is a foundational kick in the track, which we want big, fat, and powerful, really. So hope that helps answer your question. Try it by all means, but I'm not sure that there is a good reasoning behind going to that much trouble. So drum bass toned right down. We just noticed that the frequency here in the tuner isn't a D. So if you're using the drum bass and you are adding a boom and you're adding a D0, ideally the kick would be tuned to probably a D0. Let's maybe have a quick look at what scale we're in over here. So we're just going to check something musical here, one of the MIDI patterns. So they're D Phrygian. Interesting scale you've chosen there, Theo. So let's have a look at the notes that are available to us in D Phrygian. So if we fold the scale in one of these MIDI clips down here, we can see all the way down, we could have a D. Let's say we go in the 0 octave, we could have a D0, E flat, F, G, A. Okay, so G0 could be quite a good, that's one of my, by the way, I'll give away the secret, that's my favorite kick drum frequency by a long way. So, you know, if we come back to that kick, we're not in any of those notes. If you have a D0 kick, that is very low in frequency. It's 36 hertz is a D0. And this is something, by the way, a tip for you again out there, music producers. Try and learn what are all these frequencies? What does D0 mean in frequency? What is the number? So if you put an EQ up here and you hover down here, we can see if we land at 36, we can see in this bottom corner, we're seeing that a D0 kick is 36 hertz. Now that's just above sub bass. So it's a very, very, very low kick frequency. And if we come up to an E, that's still a really low kick, right? And in between D sharp, C sharp, C0, super low kick. You might as well have a sub bass really. So if we come up to a G0, that's a very common kick, 49 hertz. I programmed that in my mind looking at those charts over the years. A0, 55 hertz. These are great things to kind of program in and remember, so you can kind of like, you know, when you want a bit of a top higher kick, oh great, A0, that's a great frequency, it's 55 hertz, right? So let's come back down to what we were doing here, and we now know that a G0 would be a good option. So what we can do is put from the Ableton's browser and the audio effects, we can go and grab ourselves a shifter, and we can put that in front of this tuner here, and we can just pitch it slightly until we see, ideally, so we're actually seeing a bit of a G here. So we need to just go up slightly till we put this into the crosshairs. Let's just try it. Frequency, so we might do it in frequency rather than pitch, so we'll just undo that because I'm hearing a little bit of a delay to do with how the tuner's set up. So we'll do it this way. So you can see we can come down here and get it a little bit closer. There we go. So that would be a better result for that kick, and it's fitting in the scale with the rest of the track. So if we undo that for a second. So let's take away a few things so we kind of can listen to a few less things while we're checking this. And now let's turn off the shifter. It's a subtle difference, but it kind of, in theory, as we get more and more into the musical parts, it will kind of pull it into the track, into the groove. And it's a good idea to, again, check all those things, know what's going on. What is this synth delivering pitch-wise? Well, we now know it's delivering a G, more or less, which is in our scale. It's a note in our scale, right? So I think that's a good idea. Also, if we check the MIDI notes, we can see they're on C3, which is great. So they are not changing the pitch. We are in control of the pitch down in what we're doing here. So let's also listen to, if we turn off that rack now. So let's now say if we're going to use the drum bus, let's again tone it down a big way. So we can either do that on the dry wet or on the output here, because the output is in the red and it was kind of loudish coming in, but it's not that loud. So if we want to use this drum bus, I think we just use it a little bit more subtly, right? And we now know that we should change the frequency to match our G0. So that's going to be 49 in here, or 48. Right? So now we're matching, our boom is matching if we add boom. So before we do that, I think we should just balance it out a little bit. So if the output's fully at 0 dB here, then we can bring the dry wet down. Or we can have the dry wet 100%, as I said, and we can just drop our output down a bit. We're going to A/B that. We're not looking to sell ourselves with volume here. We're looking to sell ourselves with a color change that works. A thickening of the sound, right? Do we want crunch? That's going to make it a lot dirtier. Do we want soft drive? Heavier drive? So if we drive it a lot heavier, we might need to bring down our output again, right? Somewhere in here. Let's see if we want any boom then. I don't think so. So if I was using the drum bus, it would be something like that. If we need to boost the transients, bring out more sort of click or soften them, we can use that. So a drum bus is a great effect, but where most people kind of go wrong with it is actually slamming it, in the sense that they're a little bit tricked by volume, that it's changing things in a way. Now, I know we've spent a lot of time already just on this, but for me, pretty key thing in a techno track is to get this low end working and working strong before we jump on to everything else that needs to kind of come together. So I think these were really important things that I kind of heard straight off the bat that need to be changed here. Theo, is the drum bus now setting the dry kick? Well, that's it. Good that you mentioned that, because that's now what we're going to test. Currently, it's over everything, right? That is like whatever's, let's say it's on the dry chain currently. It's not just behind the reverb, because if it was doing that, it would be tucked in here. And then it's only affecting the reverb chain. If it's outside of that, then it's affecting everything, right? So we've got a choice now to actually check it and feel where do we think it suits best. And that's a big difference, right? In sound, big difference, because now it's just on the reverb chain, dry chain unaffected, passing through. So if we switch off the wet chain, we hear nothing. If we put it out here, we can hear it has an effect. In here, it's really quite different, right? Because it's just behind the wet chain. So the idea for me personally, I believe, is to have it more in here, because this is kind of gluing together what's going on in the, you know, perhaps you originally wanted it on just the reverb. If that's the case, then we dial it in a little bit differently. So I hope that helps, because you can hear it's quite a big difference as to where it's living. So if it's just affecting the reverb that you want the drum bus, then we would probably put it here. So again, we can have two of these, one outside, switched off. We could actually use two, and then this one, let's put the output there. And now it's just on the reverb chain going to the master, and the dry chain has no drum bus. So both choices there. Great question. Something I wanted to go through was where I was heading next, so you beat me to it. I personally think I like it more here. That makes a nice kick drum for me. And the reverb is just going to the master by itself, but we're now sort of affecting the dry chain with the drum bus in a way that I think it makes sense. Let's now turn that off, listen to the old drum bus. You know, that's selling us a big, heavy, loud thing, but this is selling more subtlety, And again, if we want a little bit more juice from it, we can bring our output up a little bit. I think compression could be nice to add here. Let's have a look at an EQ. I'm not sure that's necessary at all at this point. It's not really doing a lot. We could look at that when we were mixing the track down. So our image is telling us we've got a little bit of action here. We've monoed the ambience. We haven't monoed, again, the whole thing, which we could do if we want, but we've now got our ambience coming through, and we actually learnt that the kick itself, the synthesized kick that is, actually has some stereo on it in its own sense. But we've also played around with that a little bit as well as we've gone along here. So there's no real need at this point in time for that mono effect anymore. We kind of understand where our ambience is coming from, where the stereo width is coming from, and we're in control of it. So I think that's pretty good for this kick. So now that kick is working in most of its capacity. Let's now try the same thing with the 909. Let's have actually basically, because we've now built this little rack here, why not make it into a rack? Put a macro in here, and we can put it. We didn't want that. So let's just get back there for a second. So we could name this, if we like, something. So, you know, we could just call it our, you know, kick ambience rack or something like that. And then we could reuse this in other projects, in other tracks. And let's drag then a copy of that over to the 909, as I believe Theo was going for the same kind of concept here, but on this track instead. And let's say that we switch off all of the original versions of that, and we get to the 909 here. And I think in this section, we're only using the kick drum. We could also take it out of the rack here, but we can leave it in the rack. We'll just drag this in then behind it. And let's have a listen to, and we'll switch it off. Let's have a listen to the 909 kick. So we're going to stop that one that we were just playing around with. Let's have the 909 kick soloed. Right, and let's say that again, just before we check our kick ambience rack, let's say we do the same sort of test as we had a moment ago. So let's take out of here the imager. We'll put that at the very end just to see, and we'll put on again all of the effects that were behind the 909. And we see the same problem, right? So hopefully, as I said, you can see how useful this is, because if that was my kick drum, I'd be pretty scared. And that comes back to Xavi Diaz. Could you split the kick in two, make it mono under 100 hertz and 150 hertz in stereo? You can, absolutely, but why? What are you wanting to achieve? Do you feel like people will notice that your kick drum's stereo above 150 hertz and mono below? I don't think so. As I said, it's my opinion and feeling about it, answering your question. I don't believe that makes that a difference that would be really obvious to the listener, and I feel like it could cause you way more problems than giving you some sort of magic kick drum that nobody has out there. I'm sure plenty of people have tried that before. So that's just my quick answer to that. I'm always looking for good, functional, powerful kicks that I don't have to do a lot of processing to, right? So in this case, we know again that if we were to add all of the original effects here, wow, we got loud, and that's what your kick drum looks like. And I'm not picking on you, Theo. This is a great platform. I mean, thank you so much for sharing your track with you. But as you can see, I think we can learn a lot from, you know, controlling this, right? So let's turn all of that off and put on our new rack, and then put the imager on. And let's say, sorry, just made a mistake there. So let's turn all of that stuff off. And we'll just bring, is the imager still in the rack, or did I drag it out? Yeah, I just have an extra there. So that's great. So now we can turn the kick ambience on over here. And let's bring up the spanner for the right one. And we can see that's nicely in mono. And we've got, yeah, it's quite fat. I think it needs to go on a diet, my friend. It was way too fat. And out of control, really out of control. I mean, as I said, that would cause you huge problems in mixing. All right, so over here, we've got the drum bus and the reverb in our new ambience rack. It's in control. We've got a mono signal here, and we can hear the rumble. all the ambience. And again, we've got this beautiful control over it now. How loud is it in that chain? And if we do want to go a little bit stronger, we know we can add a drum bus to the wide ambience reverb, but I feel like, again, that just muddies things up. It's kind of what my ears tell me. If I put it in here, I think it's unnecessary. That feels like a good strong kick. So I think I'm going to roll with the 909 as the bass drum for now. We'll do a little quick comparison, but we've got our rack here now. Just going to make sure it's all set up the way I wanted it to. And again, it doesn't hurt to have the drum bus here, right? And actually switch that off. Hi Anto, nice to meet you. Thank you for dropping a comment in the chats. Please make a video about Tech House. Well, if you would like to be the subscriber submitting a Tech House track that we're working on, that's what's going on here today. This is Theo, a subscriber's Techno project that I'm giving a professional touch to turn it into unlocking what is good about it and turning into a complete kind of project. Then by all means reach out and get in touch. I will give details at the end of today's video how to do that. All right, so that rack is fine. Can close all this up. We've got our kick and our bass. So let's now sort of gradually bring in here some of the other drum sounds. So let's say the closed hi-hat next. And let's bring in the open hi-hat so we can just have a little bit of a check here. I feel like in the mix here, the closed hi-hat, if it's going to be in here, it needs to be louder in the mix. So let's have a look at the MIDI a little bit. And let's put it in comparison to the open hi-hat so we can see them side by side. So Theo's kind of carved out a little bit of space in here to let the open hi-hat happen when the closed hi-hat doesn't, but it's kind of still a little bit masked in here. The open hi-hat is so dominant. So we kind of need to bring it out of the mix a little bit if we're going to have it there. Otherwise, I feel like by the time all the drums come in, this guy over here, this poor closed hi-hat, we're not really noticing it. We take it in and out, right? So if we bring it up a bit louder, now we start to know that it's worth having it in the track. Otherwise, my first instinct with that would have been to get rid of it, right? It would have been something I would have removed. We can also tone down the open hi-hats a little bit. Let's have a look at what we've got going on with that. We can obviously bring the volume down, but we could also sort of shorten up the envelope perhaps a little bit. So we've got the release automated here. We could try it just with the so that could be something interesting to try, like a shorter open hi-hat, so it's not quite so splashy. But if the release is automated, we can probably play around with that, which it seems to be, but I have a feeling that's part of the rack over here. So let's have a quick check of that. Where is that mapping? Where does the map of the release go? Yeah, I'm not so sure on that, but we can see there's a green dot here, so it's kind of mapped. I don't believe it's here. Maybe it is. Let's say if we open up the macros a bit further. No, just the two. All right, so that's one of the things. We could sort of take this over a little bit more, take it out of the rack actually, if that's all that's happening on this track. So why don't we do that actually? Why don't we copy this 909 hats here? So we're going to copy it there. Just make sure there's nothing else that we need from it. And then we're going to remove the rack. And then we're going to paste, hopefully. If not, we'll just try that again. We can also ungroup it, but let's just try again. Just the simpler is all we want. So let's try that, because you can also ungroup over here, but I think it's going to be, so let's just try what I want to do here. There's a few ways we can go about this. There we go, perfect. So now if the notes here are on C3, if they're not, we're just going to fix that. So there's our open hi-hat. We're going to bring it up. all the way up to C3. So they're on the default pitch of the sample, but now we've got that release unmapped. And now we can kind of take control of that ourselves. Because what would be really nice is in the track later, Theo, when you're arranging it, you can play around with this. That could be a really nice way to build up some tension. So it could be a really sort of short cut-off 909 hat that opens up over time. But now we've got a bit of control over that. Nice. Not much else to say on that. Also, we can come the other way. So I think a kick and our bass are working good. The open hi-hat and the closed hi-hat kind of make sense around each other for now. Let's bring in some of the other stuff over here. So what have we got here? Bit of a snare and a clap loop. Okay, so we could potentially look at the envelopes over here in the transient preserve and maybe just have a look at bringing that down a little bit so hear what that would sound like. So we make a little bit more space, so let's just listen to that. Right, so we could really tighten it up with that. And we could, again, actually make some variations of that where we kind of copy this clip. So I'm guessing all of these are the same, right? So I'm just going to make one for Theo where we kind of color it differently and make that a number 2. And that number 2 is going to be one where we play around with that preservation mount, and the original red ones are going to be just as they are with the full preserve transient amount. Because you can probably hear, if we start to add that to a few other things. Hi Antu. So electronic music, lovely techno music. How can I send you my track? Well, stick around if you can to the end of the stream and I will give you some details. Or if you like, look at the video description. And at the bottom you will find there is a contact form, or you can go to my website. Just go to my website, fill out the contact form. It's got my email there, just let me know, and then we can start a conversation about that in there, or you can also send me a DM in Instagram, which is also in the video description. Okay, so I hope that helps, Anto. All right, back to the music here. So let's look at the 2 clip that I just kind of haven't done anything but colored it, and let's bring the preserve transient down. We need the straight through arrow. Again, I just think it opens the space a little bit more. It's subtle, but if it's 70 versus 100, it's a little less busy. Also, Theo's pitched it down. I'm going to go around 74, pitched it down a couple of semitones. Let's listen to it with an original pitch. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a good move. I like that. So let's keep it pitched down. Is there an opportunity to pan it a little bit? Maybe. So if we look at the audio output here, we can see the right hand side of this particular snare and clap loop. It's a little bit to the right, louder than the left channel. So let's follow that bit. Just a bit. That'll help give us some space there as well in the drums, right? So let's put the open hi-hat back in. Let's bring that volume down and rebalance that. Nice. Okay, let's have a listen to this other percussion track over here. Let's have a look at maybe turning the panning off for a second to see if that makes sense, that it's heavily moving to the left-hand side of the mix. So I would argue with this one that actually the sample's right-hand side louder, right, which we can see up here. And so the tip with that is actually, which most people, I'm not sure if Theo was thinking about that when he panned it to the left. So if we put the left here, if you do that, you're kind of correcting it. You're sort of saying like, oh, I'd like to sort of make the left repair it so it kind of comes back up to matching the right. Well, funnily enough, the tip with panning or changing the balance is actually to follow the louder side, kind of like what I did here. So in this case, when we actually take off what Theo's done here, it's naturally over to the right. Let's leave it like that. And we might actually go back to the other one and bring it back because it's much more subtle. And this sound is now naturally a little bit over to the right in our mix. And let's balance it. And again, I'm not going to go into mixing here today too much, but we might have a little look at the processing just quickly through here, just to make sure. So we've got a nice 909 kick with the ambience going on, closed hi-hats making sense, it's popping out in the mix, the open hi-hats working, the snare and clap loop is working. Okay, so that probably could, let's put a quick EQ on the clap and snare loop. And let's just get rid of any low end if there is any. Quick listen to it on its with the other loop, let's say, and the kick maybe. A-B that. Just a bit of extra safety there, so that kind of keeps it out of the way of what we're trying to do with our low ends. Let's have a listen to what this does to this loop. Kind of feel like the EQ could be in the front of those effects, so it's kind of the input into the effects that we're cleaning up a bit. Maybe we'll have 2 EQs, so we'll leave what Theo had on that side and we'll bring in another EQ8. That's also, while we're doing this, we'll have a very quick save, as I did have a crash in the last couple of weeks of live stream, and we'd hate to have that happen right here in the middle of the stream and not be able to get what we've done so far back. So let's have a version 2.3 save. As I said, 12.1 seems on my end that I had a couple of times a little bit of a crash. So I hope you're enjoying the live stream here. We are today working on a subscriber's music who happens to be hanging out in the chat. That's Theo. And he's kindly provided this techno project here, and I'm trying to give it the professional touch and unlock what's good about it. And let's see if we can raise the bar of it a little bit, raise the level of it to a professional sound. So let's have an EQ8 in the front here on this loop. Let's also just have a listen to the top end of it, if there's something there. Okay, so I'm just listening, just like the low ends. Do I want this one sitting a bit higher than the snare and clap loop? And in this case, I think it makes sense that it does sit a bit higher. Let's have a comparison with the closed hi-hat. And then the open. So it could be the highest of the highs here, this particular loop, or it could sit a bit lower, but I think it actually belongs the highest of the highs. So it's actually right at the very top. So again, like we discovered with the kick drum, these are the sort of things you want to kind of understand about what's going on in here. We understand now that, oh, checking all those different hi-hats and different high things we have, that is the one that we're sort of saying, you have the top end of the high end here, this particular loop here. So these are the things we sort of want to understand, control, figure out, have a handle on it, right? So we do now. I think on the open hi-hat, we could also throw an EQ8 here and just pop any low end off the bottom. We'll do that in a second, and we'll also check the effect on that there is one. So let's come back to the effects now here. Bit of reverb, fairly low amount. Okay, could be that we could do that probably with a return, a send and return, like an A to the A reverb a little bit, rather than having it bang onto this particular loop track. It's not hurting anything, but that could be something we could do differently here, but we're not going to spend too much time on that. And the delay, okay, a bit more groove. It's kind of nice. Maybe a little less. Okay, so if you put that EQ afterwards, we can hear huge difference, right? Because it's cutting away the low end after. So if we turn this off, it sounds very different. So let's do a comparison. Do we want the EQ post effects? And that sort of is really removing a lot of the sort of snare that's in this loop. So on these hits here, there's body and sort of low end to that. So if you put this in, takes that body away, right? If we have this EQ, kind of keeping that, right? So what do we think fits best here? Let's solo the drums. Well, I'm kind of leaning towards both. I think it's aggressive, but I actually don't mind it. There's this aggressive low cut. So Theo's basically sort of saying, what he's telling me here is he wants the sort of claps to be mainly dominant from here, and this to be sort of a groovy type loop where the claps aren't really a feature, right? Whereas if we take this off, we really hear the clap. So I kind of like it. I think I would roll with that, and this EQ in the end is not hurting anything either. It's absolutely kind of controlling a little bit, so we could maybe leave the high off here, leave the low cut, and we could maybe leave this one then, as if we do tweak the highs a little bit, we have a little bit in that second EQ. Nothing wrong with having two EQs. One's doing the input and one's doing the output post effects, right? So now comes the fun stuff. So let's do a quick little rearrange in here. Let's bring things together in this drum group where they're playing all together, right? So we're going to bring everything across because these guys, maybe they play, let's have a quick look down here. So we're kind of playing this scene here, over here. Let's give it a white color over here. So that's the scene I'm currently kind of playing my way through. We could also kind of switch these around. So I'll just switch my two for the one there. So we're in that scene. Let's bring that kick down, or before we do that, let's copy it down so Theo can, hang on, try that one more time. So he can be aware that, you know, the changes I've made. So let's also maybe give that the color. So I've added that into that scene, right? This guy here at the moment, I'm not using, but I think it has the improved control, and maybe it's up to Theo. It does have a nice punch to it, that kick. What we could do is actually potentially layer those, but I think let's see how we go for time, because we've got to get more of some of the really important things built here. But that could actually be interesting to not just have them side by side and play both kicks together like they are, but actually bring them all together in one kind of rack and have the 909 with a bit of this kick as a layer. And maybe similarly to what you just saw with that percussion track, we get quite aggressive on this better kick, as it's called. We get quite aggressive on an EQ on the end of it here, and it just provides a bit of punch, because it does have a nice kind of punch to it. I do like the kind of click and punch to it, and I think it does actually sound quite okay. But that's just like that, it's lazy, and it's not enough control, and I wouldn't do that. So don't run away with that idea. If this is going to be joining this, there needs to be more work, and it needs to be layered. Preferably I would do it in the same rack, playing the same MIDI, and I can then control it. But like I said, the other option is you use these as an arrangement tool, and one kick is playing at certain points in the arrangement and another kick is playing at other points in the arrangement. I think the 909 would be the fat kick that I'd want to deliver when I were just going low and dropping into the fat kick. So the better kick, I'm just going to move across in the rack as it's not currently then in play. These other rim shots and things, let's just have a quick look up here. Do they appear? Okay, later in another scene, there is a rim shot. But the rest of the tracks, we're all kind of familiar with that, how they sound, right? So the rim shot is one that we haven't included just yet. So maybe we color that white. We can look at that and see if that can fit. But I think you've got a nice groove there, Theo, which credit to you. As I said, we've just kind of polished that already a little bit now. So on to the next things. Now the fun starts. Well, the fun's already started, I think. So I hope you found this useful, beneficial, all of that. So on the bass line, we've kind of got the bass line here in an audio clip. Let's have a look. We've got a few versions of it here. So if we zoom out here, it looks like that's the kind of recording there, which is kind of quite useful actually. So let's maybe have, I'm guessing these are the same, but they're just kind of looped in a smaller section by the look of it. So they're just like kind of a tight loop. Well, actually up here, I think it's that, but it's zoomed in because this is only 2 beats worth of the bass that we're seeing here. So if we were to bring that clip down, let's say, it's not really going to change anything. I think this is just cropped probably. Yeah, it looks like it's just cropped from that area. So let's say, are these the same? Yep. So we can get rid of one of these for that longer clip that isn't cropped, because what I want to do with that, change color, is I just want you to see like the bass line, right? So we can kind of see that it's what we would say kind of absolutely covering right across all the beats, right? So it's not a syncopated bass, it's a bass that is playing at the same time as the kick drums. And, you know, something that's worth doing sometimes is if we duplicate this 909 track over for a second, and we basically bin all of these MIDI clips off there, we're just going to make this a fast transaction, let's say, and then we literally freeze flatten that. We're going to have that now in audio, right? And we're going to be able to see if we take that, let's say we drag that over and drop it here just in the arrangement view for a second, and then we go and get our bass and we do exactly the same. Let's try that again. We bring it down here, bassline audio, down into there. And we do just a little bit of the back to arrangement for a second, and we drag this out. We don't need too much of it. Just there's 4 bars, right, of the 2. And let's for a second bring that all the way up below this 909 just so we can look. We know that they are going to be heavily involved with each other, right? I don't know yet what is the pitch of this bass, like what is the note. It also looks like it's stereo, by the way. It's not mono because we have 2 channels of it, which is interesting as well. So it's a stereo bass again, maybe deliberately, maybe not. They're going to be working quite hard together currently. And that's, again, something we kind of is really good to see, know, and understand, because we want to control that, right? Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's fine. You don't need to you know, drop everything in the chat there. I'm following along fine here. It kind of helps me to explain it, I think, as we go. Thank you anyway, all the same. Right, so we kind of can see that sometimes printing things, if you're not sure, is really helpful, right? To see that kind of thing here. So what I've just kind of learnt a bit in that bass, let's drag it back over to here, is that the audio bass, we don't have the instrument here because I think it's a hardware instrument by the look of it. We do have the MIDI, but like I said, it's kind of stereo. So you've got a left and a right channel to it. So let's have a look. If that's the case, what's kind of going on with the bass a little bit? Again, could we improve that? could be something I wasn't thinking about, but I'm seeing that that could be, again, something potentially that we might want to take a look at. We do know it's absolutely playing at the same time as the kick, right? But now let's try and establish if it's playing at the same time as the kick, where does it sit in tuning with the kick? Is it an octave higher? Is it below the kick? Where is it? Because if we know kind of what note it's playing and whether it's stereo, which it seems it is, can we improve that? Is it not the best fit for the kick drum? So turning off the processing makes a massive difference. Again, I'm guessing it's the drum bus, so let's have that in so we can hear. So we can see it's jumping around a fair bit here. It's not like a solid D or a solid F or something like that. Let's try an EQ as an option here to see what we can learn from this bass. So let's grab ourselves an EQ8. And we'll use that instead of the tuner to kind of see what's going on. What's kind of lowest notes here a little bit? So it seems to be C1, more or less. Maybe if we check the MIDI, what was the MIDI notes that was originally set to play here? D3. So, you know, that would be confusing, right? Because the MIDI notes say they are just pedaling on a D. But we're not really seeing that in the audio, right? And that means the synth itself could have had the pitch a little bit different. If we sit on D3, we'd be all the way up there. And there's no MIDI notes there, right? Or there's no obvious, the bass line is not there. So again, I hope that helps you, Theo, because you might have MIDI notes in D showing in the MIDI clip, but you can obviously see your bass line is not pitched or tuned in that area. It's more playing something like a C1 or a mixture of pitches down in here, or it's moving around. So the lowest fundamental here is more like about a C, which is interesting, and it's stereo. Let's check that with the imager as well, just as we kind of work our way along here. So let's grab ourselves again the Ozone imager, pop that in here. Okay, so we do have mono showing up there. That's okay then, I'm kind of cool with that. Let's put that after the drum bus. Do we get any information cover there? No, so we're looking pretty good there. Fine, we don't need to kind of mono out that bass, we can leave it as it is. We could repitch it, we could have it in audio, we could make a new bass line, but we could repitch it. Let's see again in D Phrygian. Nice scale, by the way, but I'm not familiar off the top of my head with the notes that are in D Phrygian, so I'm gonna not cheat, but go in here, turn on scale and have a look so I can remind myself. So if it is playing a C, C1, we're kind of okay. You see we're in the scale. So if it's floating around that area, I don't think we've got a real problem. That my ears are telling me as well that it sounds pretty okay tuning wise, right? So I think we can stick with that as it is. So let's come across, we've got an acid lines here. Let's drop that in. That's pretty cool. If we have a look at that, just looking at the bass line again, let's just check the processing before we move on with the bass. So the drum bus was hugely influential here again. Again, we've got a bit of a weird kind of boom setting here. I'm not sure that's in scale, but doesn't really matter. Let's just check what it sounds like and then we can sort of give it the thumbs up or tweak it a bit. So, you know, it adds plenty of character here. The input, obviously, it makes things a lot louder. But sometimes you've just got to trust your ears and sort of say, well, okay, maybe what's set up in here isn't necessarily technically perfect, but if it sounds good, we roll with it. So let's say we roll with that. What about the EQ then? What was that doing? Okay, so he's tried to kind of control a little bit this kind of boominess of it. So maybe if you were less with the boom actually in the drum bus, you wouldn't need that cut there, right? So if you, then you wouldn't be EQing that away, right? So I think you can do that differently back in here rather than needing to cut it here. But yeah, I think most of the changes would be in here. We can leave that on. Again, maybe I think I'd leave the high cut off in this case. So you've just got a little bit of a low cut on the subs, which is okay, but I don't think I'd set the high cut just yet as it was, just to let it run a bit freer up there. So the one thing we would do is, if we're sticking with this bass for me as it is, I would absolutely go in here, and for today, again, in the purpose of this video, I would grab a compressor here, and this can be a bit earlier on in the chain, and I would sidechain it. Now, personally for me, I would have a separate sidechain track to the 909, and the reason being for that, I want in a moment to sidechain the bass to this kick drum, but think about it when you arrange the track. If the kick drum doesn't play and you've sidechained the bass to that kick when it's not playing in a break, but maybe the bass keeps playing, the sidechain is going to be deactivated. So for me, I often would do something like this. I'd duplicate this 909. I'd probably take off all the extra kicks that we don't need. We've got one pattern of it here, and I would turn this into the sidechain track. Okay, so in the session view, it's kind of easy because this is just going to keep going around in a loop for now, which is going to do exactly what we need. But if we have it in the arrangement view, we would need to take this MIDI here, bring it over, and essentially drag it right out for the full length of the track, right? So hopefully you're following that. I work with separate sidechain tracks. That means if I sidechain something to this, which is the 909 kick, a copy of it, it's going to not drop out when the kick might not play in the arrangement. Now, there's one last thing we need to do here, and that is we don't want to hear this, right? This sidechain track. We're going to drag it out of the rack, throw it over here as well to the left. We don't want to hear it. We want it to trigger and play. So let's actually also copy a clip of it down to this scene here. So if we hit that play on that scene, it's going to be working, but we don't want it to play, right? We want it to play, but we don't want to hear it. So let's just send the audio to sends only. And now we won't have an output of this. It's silent. So it's going to play, it's going to trigger, but we're not going to hear it because we don't want to double up with the kick drum, right? But we now have a separate sidechain track. So let's go kick, bass, and then let's get in here and now choose sidechain, choose the input as the sidechain track that we've just built, bring the threshold down, and get our bass line grooving around that. Let's make it peak. And I think this is really important for this track with that bass line. We know we already printed the kick, we know the bass covers the kicks, right? A kick is happening here, a kick is happening here, right? So it's a pretty important move. This bass for me needs a bit of a sidechain. It's in C1, the kick is in G0. Again, we've done some nice thinking and understanding here. They're fitting well, but now it kind of grooves and fits around. And if we put the sidechain after the drum bass, we can always try that, right? We can move it around a bit, but I think it can work as the input to then the rest of the effects. And also if we A/B it now, let's give it a bit of makeup gain back. And we're trying to match, like when that compressor is switched off, what does the kick sound like? Sorry, what does the bass sound like? When we put it on, are we louder? a little bit. And you can use this great in 12.1. The metering is way better, and you can kind of see on the left hand side what is coming in level wise right there, and what is it looking like coming out. And if it's louder, well, we know that we've added volume then, and we could just bring that down a bit. First your ears, second you can check there. We can also maybe switch the EQ off here. So the kick thumps harder with the EQ off, which I like. So nice. I think we've got the bass working with the kick a little bit better. Let's bring it back up a bit. So we can kind of hear that grooving now. So if we drop in some of these other loops, how are we sitting? Not that one, that's the wrong one. Now some of these, for example, this guy here could maybe copy that sidechain compression that we've just set up there onto the percussion loop. Try a little bit of this. Doesn't need to be, we need to readjust it, so let's readjust it a bit. Just a little bit. Let's check the release. The release knob on a compressor like this is like the groove tool. The longer release around here, I've lost my groove. The shorter release, too short, somewhere in here, and you can see the kind of reaction to the compressor on the gain that it's taking away, like if we're looking in this view. So I'm not going to do a compressor masterclass, but that's the compressor resetting itself once it's done the compression, and the shorter it is, it reacts faster, the longer it is, it reacts slower. And if you get that wrong, you knock all the groove out of something, which we want in this case. So on the clap loop, we do need to add back a bit of volume. Not as much as that. So that's just tightening up the groove again a bit. Nice. Just going to zero out this track so it doesn't get in the way. Okay, so moving on, I think we've got a nice groove. We've got the drums flowing with that. This acid line I really like. Let's just have a quick look at it. It's got some processing on it. It's in audio. I think it fits the track well, so not much to say there. And I think there's a variation here with a little bit of a different sort of pattern. So let's have a listen to that maybe. Just take off this two other groups over here. So we've got a 1 and a 2 there. So again, I'd label this second one a 2, so we know that's a different version of the same acid loop. And let's have a look at what it sounds like with the effects on or off. Let's put it in context with some stuff, always better, I think. Get a feel for it. Quite like that, makes sense. Yeah, I'm not sure that we need 2 echoes. I see they're doing a bit of a different thing, but we can do that in the one delay as itself if we like, to have the left and right different to each other. What was going on in this one? Let's just check. So you kind of had quarter and eighths in the left and right channel, no feedback, dotted, no reverb, stereo output, dry wet. Yeah, so I think we can kill two birds with one stone, as we say in English here, on this delay here. And set that up like so. So let's also just bring this percussion down a little bit now. All of that's sitting nicely in the mix, but let's all have it down a little bit. Okay, so let's use this second bit of time, period of time here to get stuck into what's kind of missing over here. So we've got a vocal, we've got this kind of pad track, but we're kind of missing like a lead element. And I think that's the key to kind of unlocking this track. And maybe I should have jumped to this faster, but in this case, it was nice to kind of work our way along and sort of figure out, and I think it's really good to get that foundation right of the groove and the bass line and kind of get it working in the best way we can to start with. So let's drop in a MIDI track and let's see about coming up with some sort of element here that's, you know, like what I think Theo had in mind over here with MIDI melodies and chords and things in this group, but we don't have that element in the track. So maybe we do try a couple of different ideas. So let's say we start with a simple MIDI clip, an empty MIDI clip, and we want to be in D Phrygian, right? So let's say that we make it the same scale as the bass and the other elements that are musical. So D Phrygian, where are you, my friend? Phrygian, somewhere in this list. There we go. So now if we switch that on, we've got our D Phrygian here. Now D being the root note, C being the seventh. Maybe we have something where we sort of go along a bit and then we drop down into a bit of the seventh. Something like that for a second, just a very simple sort of pattern. Let's maybe say we put analog on this to start with. So I'm going to show maybe two different versions of what I think could be a good idea here. Something like a bit of a chord stab or a stabby kind of sound. So let's start with the analog. So maybe we can make this like 2 bars and we can do more C's. And then a few more. And I want to sort of keep it, the rhythm for the moment, around sort of 2 semitones apart a little bit here. So we'll look into that in a little bit, but maybe we'll just try something like this for a second. And now what we're going to do is, on the first example, we're going to try and sort of like use the synth to kind of build a bit of a kind of chord out of it. So how can we do that? So instead of being in the MIDI over here and writing a chord, we're going to use, as I said, the synth and tune the oscillators apart. So let's also randomize the velocity of these notes a bit using Ableton's built-in randomization tool. So we've got a little bit of variation and groove on that. Now let's play around a bit with the analog. So let's detune one of the oscillators. We'll try a 7 semitones or a fifth above. And we could leave it a saw wave for a moment. We could also go 10, which is like a 7th chord. This is the top of the triad here. We can also go in the negative direction. Which sounds quite nice, right? So maybe we go a bit more moodier and we drop the other oscillator. Instead of pitching it up, we drop it below. So let's detune them a bit apart. Could also try a bit of pitch envelope here. Probably not going to go with that. I think the detuning at the moment works okay. Let's try it at 5 down. Let's add some noise. So yeah, just working our way through the oscillator sections. The noise is going to help it cut through. We could try a different oscillator shape. I think either a saw or a square to get that kind of bit of vintage color. Let's maybe try a square and a saw and a square for a moment. Let's go to the amp envelope. So we could have it really short, release. We could have a plucky. Let's maybe take out a few sounds. So I was kind of liking it here with a short release. Maybe a little bit of attack slowed down. Let's have some unison. Maybe polyphonic, monophonic rather than poly. And then on this filter, let's have a bit of resonance. And let's play around a bit with the envelope of the filter. So right now, also maybe the filter type. So we could maybe try one of these more grittier filters. And then play around with the envelope amount. Okay, let's try just that idea for a second with everything else in. So we need to pop those tracks back in. Let's bring our analog down into that scene. I could also try another rhythm here. Let's try a second clip. I think the notes are quite okay. Like D and C I think works quite well. Let's try just a slightly different pattern where we do dotted eighths instead. So yeah, I think that's the rhythm that I would be looking for. So let's add a little bit of processing to this. Let's pop it to the audio effects. By the way, if you're joining this live stream on YouTube here, today we're working on a subscribers track provided by Theo, Techno project of his, and we're trying to help him here unlock the potential of this track. I think he had a great platform to work on here. Sounds really good, and we're just kind of trying to elevate it a little bit. So let's have a few effects here. Could I also play the rim shot? It's part of the track. Yeah, we could check that in a little bit. Again, it was not in the scene that I kind of started with, let's say the peak of the track. So the chorus. Let's have a little bit of raw on here. Bit of reverb. Let's have a look at where we are in pitch as well. We're up in this range. Maybe we'll try it down one. Try my semitones again. A little bit of echo here. Just a really short, tight Okay, let's try and bring in a couple of the other things. Theo would like to hear the rim shot, so let's have that in the same scene. Maybe we can look at the rhythm of that a little bit. Have a look at what's going on here. Okay, kind of like it a bit more cleaner. Corpus is interesting. So I think the corpus is kind of cool. Adds a nice bit of character to the rim shot. Let's have a look at maybe the envelope. Pitch. Yeah, kind of like it re-pitched a little bit. Okay, let's have a look at this second effect. It was a reverb. Again, if I'm picking up one thing maybe, is that I think you could kind of streamline your reverbs a little bit and use the return tracks, right? As we starting to get in these different tracks, different kind of reverbs within each individual track, that can end up being not sounding like a really cohesive space that you're putting your track into, like a room or a hall that everything has the same reverb and reflections from. Sometimes it can work to have a mixture of reverbs, maybe something like short reverb, medium, and a long reverb, and then you send different things to those different reverbs. But when you get a lot of different types of reverbs in all sorts of different locations in your track, you can end up with a bit of a mess of reverb and not that kind of glue that you can get by having a common reverb. So something maybe to think about there is having a reverb send and return workflow, as I've noticed that we've got few different types as we've gone along here. Yeah, I'm not sure about the reverb there. Let's have the delay. Let's have it in with the groove. Yeah, it's a little bit messy. So we can maybe make that delay a little bit different. And what about the EQ? Okay, it's not currently doing anything, so maybe let's just put the EQ in, and again we might bring it before these devices, give it a bit of a low cut. Yeah, so I'm not sure that delay kind of groove. So let's say we leave the delay there that you have, and we'll just switch it off. We won't delete anything, and we'll just add another delay, and we'll just say that it's not quite as kind of wild. The reason this one's it's interesting, but it's kind of doesn't groove with the track is that it's kind of out of note sync, which can be really interesting. The delays are in time. And that's the main thing. So if you wanted to use time, you might need to adjust this a little bit so that it then kind of grooves. So what do we mean by that? Well, maybe it's easier just to duplicate this one, and then we'll leave one as it is, and then we'll play around with the time on this one. I don't know if you we're trying to match the BPM of the track or something like that, which is a possibility with that. You can look up the BPM of the track and sync the delay to that, whether that was something you were doing there, I'm not sure. But just using my ear, I'm trying to get it to groove, right, with the drum groove a bit, instead of sort of bouncing off it a lot. And it's fine-tuning it. Something like that. But here's another option, as I said, is if we actually use a delay that is note synced, so we'll put it right outside here, and we put it in note sync. But what we do is we modulate the time over here a little bit. We can get it a little bit wonky if that's kind of what you're looking for. So it gets kind of wobbly. It's like an LFO is moving this stuff around a little bit. So you can have it in note sync, which keeps it really tight, but you have it groove around a bit, move around a bit, should I say. I've used another reverb here, but again, I would probably not do that if it was my track, or I would make sure that it's sort of copied where I have the other reverbs, or I'd put it on a return track potentially. Okay, so let's try the other acids groove here. So now we can put that back to the original color. Bring down the tri-wet of the delay a bit. I think on this we can also have an EQ at the start here. Check the input of the acid loop. Doesn't really need to be down in there mixing it up with the bass, I don't think. Have a bit of an EQ on these little vocal hits, just clean them up a bit. Let's copy that over. So let's look at this analog track and let's see about another version of that with another MIDI track. So similarly, a little bit different. So an idea here could be to come up with something else, another alternative way of this kind of lead idea, or, you know, little riff that we've got going on here, which was trying to sort of get in the techno spirit here. The main key here is it's kind of like playing a chord, right? Effectively, what we're doing here is we've got this, all these notes triggering here, and we've got... So we're playing the fifth here, but we're using another oscillator to do that. So instead of putting the MIDI like that, we've tuned the oscillators apart. And it's a really great way to get this kind of sound of a thicker, kind of more interesting lead kind of sound by doing that, right? But another idea on a second MIDI track could be, again, we just start with an empty MIDI clip and we put in a chord from the scale, something like this. So that would be the basic triad. We could go for some sort of fourth chord. So the trick here is play, skip a note from the scale, play, skip a note from the scale. So that's the fourth chord there. We could also do a more edgy chord from the scale. So this is a minor chord. Looking at the root chord is a minor. So let's actually just throw an instrument on here so we can kind of hear what it sounds like. Let's say we maybe throw wavetable on this track, and we'll just mute the track 19 for a moment. And we're just gonna try out some other chords, right? So if we kind of like do a copy of this one, chord 2 is also a minor chord. We just need to, it's a major chord, should I say. So we just need to move our play, skip, play formula there. So that would be chord 2. So if we just mute chord 1 for a second. And I think for me, I'd be drawn to a minor chord. So if I make my life a little bit quicker here, that's the third chord. It's also a major. So I can tell that just by that first interval. And then if we jump across and do the fourth chord of the scale, it's minor. Okay, so far we've got minor on the 1, minor on the fourth chords, and then the fifth chord is another minor. So 4 and 5 could be cool, or 1. I think we want a minor chord as the chord idea. 6 is also a minor, or actually one of these, I think it's chord 6, is a diminished chord. So it's 3 and then 3 again. So that's the black sheep chord out of this particular scale. Hang on, where are we in the scale actually? May have made a mistake there. We're up to 2, 3, 4, 5. So chord 5 is diminished in the scale, which is kind of interesting because it's you know, the most edgiest chord in the scale, and then we've got a major again then on the 6th and the 7th, probably a minor again, I would believe. So if we come across and come up to the 7th chord, a little bit of music theory, another minor. So yeah, maybe if we try the diminished, so that was 5. So chord 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's this guy here. So if we try that for a second, that's going to be a pretty edgy kind of sounding chord. Let's build it out to the 4th. Let's bring it down an octave. So that would be a pretty kind of edgy chord potentially to have as a chord idea, as it's the diminished one from the scale. Tripping feel with an envelope vibe. I like it. Thanks, Xavi Diaz. Appreciate your comment. So let's stretch this chord out a bit. Maybe make it, that'd be 1 beat, couple of beats long. And a fun thing you can do when you're doing this is you can actually go and work your way through a bunch of presets in the sense of the instrument, right? So in this case, I've just got a default wavetable here, but if you've bookmarked a bunch of presets or you have a bunch of your favorite synths kind of bookmarked, it could even be third party, you could start, you know, dropping these down in here. And essentially we're just looking for something to play the chord back. Now I like making my own sounds, but we could do this. What we do have to watch out for is any of these that might have tuning in them though. That is tuning that's different to the chord. So for the moment we're going to use our ears, but we would be looking into that as well to make sure we're not going to get anything kind of weird. That's somewhere where people trip up a lot, is that just like I made the analog, there could be tuning in the oscillators and the chord is playing this and the oscillator playing something else and you get a mess. So that's a pretty cool instrument there. What we could do actually is throw that in a rack and then we can try out a couple of others, dropping them in the rack here and then decide which one we're going to use. So we're going to use just some of these presets in the case that it's a little bit quicker. Looking at the clock as well, don't want to keep you here all day. And these are ones that I've bookmarked over time that I kind of thought were quite interesting. So let's have that one down in here. We'll just turn the first one off. And that diminished chord, it kind of is quite techno-y. As I said, that's why I went through and checked all those, you know, different chords to see if there was something a little bit more interesting out of the chords that would be a bit more edgy. So that says chord already in the title, so I'm not going to choose that because that would be definitely with some tuning involved, I would imagine. Yeah, that's a good sound. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up an audio track next door. And we're not going to do much else other than now open up these two tracks here. And we're going to record into this new audio track we've added here from the instrument that we've got with the chord on it. So let's set that up. turn the track to in, arm it. So this MIDI clip, this chord that we've got here, it's going to play into there with that preset of the sound. Let's also give it a little bit of random velocity on the notes. So there's a bit of vibe there as well. We could spend more time with attention to detail there, but we're going to just jump straight into recording this into the audio track. Okay, and we don't need many of those, we just need a few of those, right? So literally what we've done is just made our own recording of that chord with that synth preset on it, right? I also had the volume down here, didn't really hurt, but you know, might sometimes zero that out so you get the maximum recording here, but we can very easily go to the clip gain here and make these louder, so it's not really a big problem. So that whole track with the diminished fourth chord on it and the instrument, that's going to go out of the project over here, and we'll just give it, you know, a sort of color, and we're going to mute it, and that's we're not going to use anymore. Let's also hide our return tracks because they are taking up real estate and we're not using that workflow. So we'll have it outside over there, and then with this audio we're going to have a brand new MIDI track next door to our analog, and on that MIDI track we're just going to drag that audio down and drop it into a simpler, right? And now we've got our resampled chord. And actually before we do that, so let's actually turn the volume up here a bit. So these are a bit louder. Just make sure you don't clip them. So it can be a bit louder without clipping. Something like that. And we're going to drag that down into the MIDI track. And we've got one of the chords, and we can move it around, and we could try different chords. They do look a little bit different because of the modulation that happens, and we can zoom in or blow it up and make sure that you're getting the attack portion of that you're looking for. So we can mess around with that. And now what we're going to do actually is try the MIDI that we have on the analog, the one that I've already written here, to replay the chord that's now in the simpler. So let's see what that sounds like. And it sounds cool. Let's normalize the volumes in here a bit. So that experiment for me worked really well, right? So if we compare it to the analog, we've now just got something a little bit different. We've got sort of like these notes down here playing a riff of the D's and C's, but they're now sort of replaying that diminished chord from the scale. And so we're getting kind of old school sampler repitching kind of effect here, where we're repitching those chords. The good thing is they're all glued into the scale. We've not gone out of scale, but we've now got this kind of cool, I think, riff that's made out of that little workflow. And now we can tweak it around a bit. So they could be plucky if we want, or full. But we've kind of got interesting tuning, right? It's kind of a little bit different sounding because of the way it's been built. So let's add the kind of same processing little rack I had here on the analog, copy it over. So let's rack it up, and we'll just copy that onto this. Let's bring the echo down a bit. And I think what would be nice in this case is to add a filter from the audio effects here after this, so that we can play around with the filter in the simpler down here, but I think we'd probably like to have an auto filter after the rack here, and we can automate that and play around with the cutoff and develop that in the arrangement of the track. get an EQ on it as well, just to clean up the low end a bit, get it out the way of the bass and the kick. Could also try band piles. Now let's just have a play around with what we've got now and have a feel for it a bit. Bringing down our ambience rack a bit on the kick. I think what I would do with this acid as well, as there is two, I think this kind of needs, for me, its own dedicated track. And so I'd remove all the other clips and processing, and I'd just have the one or the two. And again, they can interact at different points in the arrangement. So that would be my thoughts there. So 2 or 1, or 2 or the original, depending on what you're kind of doing and when you're doing it. So I'm just going to pop that down, but I think that should be on its own separate track and handled, because it sounds quite different. It's got quite different sort of processing on the original synth, and so I think it sounds quite cool like that. Also the analog now, let's do a quick comparison to the chord, but I think I would be going with the, we call it resampled chord here. I really like personally the feeling of what that's brought to the track. It feels proper kind of techno to me. So the analog would be versus. That's sort of the feel I personally prefer, but I will leave the analog here. We're not going to delete it. You can kind of think about that if that's something you prefer. So let's just put it outside the main area we're working in. The thing we can also do is now get rid of our sampled chord track as well, or we can just take it and put it outside. So this is the chord, you know, in audio, just so we kind of know what's what over there. Let's do a little save, as we've made a fair bit of progress here. Okay, let's push play. And maybe make a version of that, but I think the vocal fits quite okay. I don't see any issues whatsoever with that. So by the way, if you're here in the live stream with us, you can always say hello in the chat. So you can always drop a thumbs up and or let us know how you're doing. I hope you are enjoying this stream and finding it beneficial, and big ups and thanks to Theo for letting me work on his track here in a live stream. The goal here is to take a subscriber's track and lift it up, put in the parts that were missing, perhaps give it a professional touch and unlock the kind of keys here. And I think we're pretty close. I think we need to check this pad sound now a little bit. So again, I kind of feel with that the issues might be with the pad is that when we look into it, it's sort of an audio loop. And again, when I'm not sure, I'm sure Theo spent plenty of time checking things like this, but I'm not sure if it's D Phrygian, right? I'm not really sure that it fits perfectly into the scale or the musical parts that we've got going on as we've sort of worked our way along. And it definitely, if we're sort of, let's dial in the music stuff, have a listen. The bass also clicks a little bit. It's not a huge issue. Is it the compressor? No, it's got a click kind of in the audio itself, but that's not a huge issue. It's kind of where the envelope's looping here a little bit. So you can kind of fix that potentially. What we could do is add some little fades in the arrangement view just to take away. It's got probably a little clip at the end, or we could even see if we can find a section where it doesn't have the click. But to be honest, when everything's playing together, you don't really notice that click in the bass, but you can trim that up maybe in the arrangement view. So this guy for me, it's a little bit battling. So I think we can do, again, a quick kind of pad over here. So let's say we close up a few of these things and we do our own little bit of a pad like that. I like the idea of the sounds. Let me just make sure that, okay, do we need that still? That track over here, I'm just going to check. So that's the one with the chord in it, the one we used. So actually we could possibly recycle that track. Let's have it over here. And we might use it to come up with this kind of long pad type idea that's going on here. Let's maybe say we're doing a 4-bar. Let's make the chords legato all the way over to there. We're currently on the 3rd, 4th, 5th chord, so we might make a change. Perhaps we'll just go down to the root chord here, and we'll have the D minor, that is the root. Just make sure we get the right notes, because we need to an adjustment or two there. We might keep it also a 4th chord or 7th chord, should we say. So like so. Okay, let's go up an octave. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Okay, so we need a completely different instrument to the one we used to resample, so we can get rid of that instrument here. And let's now say we want something much more ambient. Again, we could do it with from scratch, but looking at the clock, I'm going to use a preset, as that will get us to our destination a little bit quicker here without too much compromisation. Let's actually just try this with a default synth for a moment, just have a listen to it. Perhaps that will be more useful actually. So we have a sidechain compressor already in action to our sidechain track that we set up earlier in the piece. So let's actually grab that. It's this guy over here. And let's bring that over, a copy of that, and put it onto the wavetable track. So we're going to use that there as well. Let's just make sure that we copied it, not removed it. So it still should be on the bass audio track, which it is. So that's good news, because sometimes you can end up removing them if you're not careful. around with the chord a little bit. Okay, so I'm not sold completely on chord 1, so let's try being in D Phrygian here. It's a bit different. So let's see what happens if we're on the 4th, because we could actually maybe have a major chord in here. Works for me a little bit better. Let's add a bit of noise to this. Let's also knock off a few sounds so we can kind of hear a little bit what we're doing here. So we can put a nice kind of unusual wavetable. That's nice. And mix it with maybe a basic shape or another complex shape. Have some modulation on the wavetable positioning. You can do it with an envelope. Maybe on the filter we'll do an LFO so we can get a nice faster little bit of wobble on that. Let's note sync that. Let's tune these oscillators apart a bit. Also try a different shape here on the wavetable. So we're building out this sound. And it's got nice movement because of the sidechain, and on the modulation now that's going on inside the wavetable, right? All of this is helping it to have a vibe. Quite like this sub 1. Let's try some others. So in the end, I've made it from scratch. Went against kind of what I was saying about grabbing a preset, because I'm more comfortable in the end, kind of myself personally getting stuck in like that and getting the sound I'm looking for, what I kind of have going on in my head as I'm doing this. We've got the sidechain that's really helping it groove with the kick or our sidechain track. Let's just control the low end a little bit of it. you could decide if these play together as they can. Maybe if we do play them together a bit, we might play around a little bit where the notes sit. But I do like the resample chord where it was actually down an octave. So I think that makes the most sense where I've got them sitting across the piano. They are a bit close together, but they're kind of fitting around each other quite okay. So let's, with this acid chord here, acid line, let's try and open up all of these together, or we'll just do one. That's right, they are a bit different. So that guy actually is this track, I believe. And this is the same coming down here. So again, we just want to make one of these the sort of master clip. We could do it in the arrangement view a little bit differently, but let's say this one in the scene here, because it's just a bit soft. So let's just boost it up here with some volume. Again, just make sure you don't clip any of the peaks, because I'm kind of already close to the headroom here, right? So we're now just starting to clip. So let's say we just bring everything down a wee bit. So a dB or two here and there. So on the bass group as well. Let's just get that down. And let's come across here. This is everything I'm bringing down here. So we did just turn these up, but we're just turning everything down a little bit just to stop the master from clipping. So I'm almost there. And let's just, again, in a second, do a bit of housekeeping. So these two tracks here I haven't kind of used. We'll put them outside over to the right there. The vocals, the kind of final track here in the mix. So that can come down, or this is the group. So let's open the group up and we'll just do it individually on the different stems. We'll just bring them down a dB. Okay, let's try that. So you've still got this as a B if you wish, if you prefer it to the resampled chord, right? And then if we visit things like automation on these synths, so yeah, that's kind of where I think I can take it to today in the sense of, I'm just going to do a save again, just to update it. Let's save that and replace. Yeah, I kind of feel like that's what I wanted to achieve in here. So we've cleaned up the low end, got all the drums grooving nicely together. We've kind of figured out the tuning and how things are sort of sitting in the mix. What would be left to do here would be to, you know, essentially take this peak scene now and sort of work it into the arrangement. But we can hear everything can play together now, but they don't always have to, right? And what would I add to this if I had, you know, hours more time and I was continuing on with this session? I'd add a few drum fills, some clap fills and snare fills and things, very techno sort of little clap patterns and little snare patterns, which I'm sure Theo can easily add in and around. His drum programming was really good here. We've got this analog over here, so I sort of showed you two techniques of how we could maybe come up with that lead sound or the riff sounds that's going on in the track. And I'm just going to housekeepingly label that as the pad chord if we like. And we've got that. And the vocals, again, not too much to say there. Possibly just might, yeah, do a few variations, which I think Theo's working on over here. So really well done to Theo. I mean, it was a good base to work with. I hope whoever's been with me in the stream has enjoyed how this has evolved. And if you're watching this back on replay, of course, I hope you enjoy, learn, find it beneficial, all those kind of good things. So we'll do a little replay in a second. We'll just close up the groups here. So finally, I just want to say, again, a big thanks to Theo for sharing his track with us. It was a lot of fun to work on it in today's live stream and to help him unlock the track's potential. You'll find links in the video description below about Theo's music and his social pages where you can show him some love. That would be nice. If you'd like to see more episodes, if you enjoyed this episode and you think it's a thumbs up, we should do some more, then maybe let me know in the comments. But you know, if you're a house and techno producer yourself, we had Anto earlier in the chat here talking about he'd like to get involved. So if you are a house and techno producer working in Ableton Live and you have a track that's almost there, like this track, but could use some professional help and you're up for sharing your project and featuring in a YouTube live stream, then send us a direct message on my Instagram. You'll find that link in the video description, or you can hit me up on the contact form of my website. Links are also in the description. And I must say, I hadn't mentioned it previously, it's completely free. There is no charge, nothing involved, no strings attached. Use it how you wish to. Theo has the decision here, the final decision, what he wants to keep, what he doesn't want to keep. It's just about sort of like, you know, sharing this kind of with the community and hopefully helping other music producers sound the way they want to sound, how to produce, sound and produce like yourself. That's the goal here, helping others. So on that note, thanks to those of you who joined me, and well, let's do it all again next Sunday for another live stream between 3 and 5 p.m. here live and direct on YouTube. Not sure what the video will be about, but for sure it's going to be a good one. And by the way, I will link a video that, you know, if you enjoyed this video, I'm going to put a link here at the end, of course, to one that I think you should watch next, the next one in the line of videos here. And of course, if you are enjoying the content on the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. That would be much appreciated. Thanks again, guys and girls. Take good care of yourself, and it's over and out from me. Bye for now. See you later. Ciao.